Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with parapsychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hello, I'm Jeffrey Mishlove. Today I'd like to talk about a unique approach to financial forecasting that has emerged from the parapsychological literature. I think this particular monologue will be of special interest to those of you who have a strong background in financial forecasting, statistics, mathematics, probability theory, neural networks. If you are financial traders, for example, it's been a big interest of mine on and off over the years. I really need to do a monologue someday about my good friend Dean Brown and how he got me started in this field a long time ago. But for now, let's talk about the Global Consciousness Project. Let's start there. I've interviewed Roger Nelson, who is the founder of that project. I am linking in the upper right-hand corner of your screen right now to my interview with Roger, because that's where this unique approach begins. Roger established a very innovative project many years ago. It's over 20 years old now. I think quite a bit older than that. But in any case, what he has done is he used quantum mechanical random event generators spread around the world to capture a continuous stream of random events or random numbers. You could even put it that way. And because they're based on quantum mechanics, one might say that these generators, they're called eggs in his system, these eggs. And there are, I think at the moment, about a dozen of them operating simultaneously, mostly in North America and Europe right now, producing data every 15 seconds. And that data is being recorded, and you can actually watch it online at the Global Consciousness Project website. I'm posting the link to that in the description that follows, that is underneath the video here. The description of the video will have a link. You'll see that the data is available going back to around the year 2000 from all of these eggs around the world every 20 minutes. Well, the idea came to Roger because prior to setting up this project, he had been working at Princeton University at the PAIR Lab, the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Program, which he describes in the video, looking at the possibility that people can either predict through precognition or cause through psychokinesis perturbations in these random event generators. And the suggestion is that human consciousness is somehow able to interact at the quantum mechanical level to cause these perturbations, and sometimes over great distances. And Roger thought to himself, well, you could say that there's a kind of quantum geometry, a quantum mechanical foam, a quantum mechanical probability cloud that underlies all of physical reality. And if it's sensitive to human consciousness, then it would seem to be the case that disturbances in physical reality, earthquakes, big fires, huge political events, wars, 9/11 is a major example, that these perturbations in the group consciousness would be reflected at the level of the quantum foam, and so that we would see unusual deviations occurring in the quantum mechanical random event generators, or eggs, in this system. And indeed, over the years, they have correlated some 500 different events with perturbations in the output of the eggs in this system. I'm showing you a chart right now that you can see the odds of something like this occurring is 100 billion to 1. Now, It's over a long period of time, and the effects are actually very, very small. But when you can show it happening consistently over 500 different events, there's good reason for people to hypothesize legitimately that these eggs are somehow registering something related to consciousness. We're not exactly sure what or how, and there are many different speculations about this data and arguments back and forth between different groups of researchers and between researchers and their critics, but it's strong data nonetheless. But what I want to share with you now is a fascinating study just published this year in the Journal of Consciousness Studies by a researcher named Ulf Holmberg, an independent researcher working in Stockholm, Sweden. And he decided to do something with the same data, but a little different. Rather than look at particular one-time events to see if there's an unusual correlation or unusual output of the random event generators in the Global Consciousness Project, he decided to mine that data and to create what we call a time series, because that's exactly the way the data is formatted. Every 15 seconds, going back 20 years. Pretty sure it's 15 seconds. Maybe it's 15 minutes. But in the Holmberg study, really what he was looking at is daily. And for people working in the field of financial forecasting, a daily time series of numbers is crucial, because if you can find some variable that correlates with the stock market, if some variable can predict for you what the stock market is going to do tomorrow, well, you got a gold mine. And that's what he was looking for. So he took the output of the eggs over 20 years, more than 5,000 individual trials, and he wanted to see if that output would be correlated with a global index of stock market activity around the world. After all, the eggs are scattered around the world, and at one time I think there were more than 100 of them operating simultaneously. Today it's down to about a dozen. But for his purposes, it didn't matter. What he did is he looked at the most extreme standard deviation reported amongst all of the eggs throughout all of the time periods during the day, and he called that the maximum deviation. And he created his own time series of maximum deviations, and then he looked to see, did it correlate with stock market activity over more than 5,000 days? In other words, 20 years of data. And as a person, myself, who's worked in the financial field, I can tell you that that's a huge data set, because the markets go through so many different conditions. When I was working with neural networks for financial forecasting, we never wanted to use more than 4 or 5 years of data because of the conditions just don't remain the same. But in this case, what he found was, yes, a significant correlation predicting the following day's movement in the global index of stock market indices, and stronger correlations with particular ones, like with the Swiss stock market. Now, statistically significant, yes. The actual correlation accounted for maybe 1 or 2% of the change. But if you can accurately predict 1 or 2% of the change in the stock market consistently over 20 years, you can make some money at it. You've got to have a lot of risk tolerance. But it looks like, from all reports, it's a legitimate finding, and it opens up a huge field of investigation for viewers who may be interested in this sort of thing. It requires a technical background. Since I've worked with neural networks myself in the past, I'm very interested in this because, amongst other things, if it proves out, it could be a way for the field of parapsychology to support itself, considering that it's probably among the very most underfunded fields of scientific study ever, especially considering its importance. But there's much more work that needs to be done. For example, Holmberg's particular statistic that he called the maximum deviation for every day looks good. It looks like it's very promising, but there are many other ways you could massage that data and come up with other statistics from that data. Maybe the average deviation is better than the maximum deviation, for example. And it's unclear to me, it's not evidenced in Holmberg's study in the Journal of Consciousness Studies, as to whether he looked at other statistics and discarded them, or if this is the only one he looked at and it turned out to show a positive correlation. But working with neural networks, I have found that what's really interesting is if you can get one or two or three or four or a dozen of these very, very small correlations working together, because it's theoretically possible that they can amplify each other, or that working with many different tiny correlations, you can build a signal which is much stronger, because ultimately you really would like to see 60% or better hit rates when you're dealing with financial forecasting on a 50-50 basis. That is, will the market go up tomorrow or will it go down? That's the basic question that you're asking. So my approach would be to find various time series data that could be used as inputs in a trading system. You wouldn't base the entire trading system just on that data. Now, there's been a lot of other work in financial forecasting. I'm going to link to a few other interviews with Russell Targ and Marty Rosenblatt that we've done on using remote viewing for financial forecasting. It does seem to work well. At times, works very well. However, it's very time consuming. It's not the sort of thing that you want to do day in and day out for 20 years. Whereas working with the quantum mechanical random event generators, that's precisely the way you would approach it. So here are the thoughts that I'd like to leave with you. Is this an area that you might want to pursue on a research basis? If you're a researcher, would this intrigue you? If you're not a researcher, do you see the significance of the idea that parapsychology could support itself in this fashion? How do you think that might affect the future receptivity of a field like parapsychology? I'll leave you with those thoughts. And once again, thank you for being with me.